Helen Porter smoothed her cream-colored cardigan as she settled into seat 12C on the Tuesday evening flight from Chicago to Miami. At 58, she'd learned to pack light and travel comfortably. Her honey-blonde hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she carried only a small carry-on and her well-worn purse. The plane was filling up slowly. Business travelers tapped at laptops. Families organized snacks and tablets. Helen pulled out a novel she'd been meaning to finish, content with the quiet rhythm of an evening departure. Then she noticed them boarding. Row 5, business class. A young woman with long, golden blonde hair flowing past her shoulders, wearing an elegant white dress that spoke of refined taste. She carried a baby, maybe 6 or 7 months old, dressed in a soft white onesie. Beside her walked a man in his late 30s, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, his dark hair swept back, his strong jawline set with tension. They looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine, polished, successful, the kind of couple who seemed to have life perfectly arranged. Helen returned to her book, but she couldn't help noticing the way the young woman held the baby with such careful tenderness. There was something in her posture, a mix of devotion and uncertainty, that caught Helen's attention. The plane door closed. The safety demonstration began, and that's when the crying started. At first, it was just small whimpers, the kind every parent recognizes, the warning signal before the storm. Helen glanced up from her book and saw the young woman bounce the baby gently, her movements practiced but increasingly worried. The whimpers escalated into full cries. Then wails. The sound pierced through the cabin, raw, inconsolable, heartbreaking. The kind of crying that comes from a place beyond words, beyond reason. Helen watched as the woman tried everything. She rocked the baby. She offered a bottle. The man beside her produced a pacifier, then a soft toy. Nothing worked. The baby's face turned bright red, little fists pumping the air, legs kicking in distress. Around the cabin, Helen could sense the shift. People adjusting earbuds, businessmen closing their eyes with practiced patience, a teenage girl turning up her music. The young woman's shoulders hunched forward, and even from several rows back, Helen could see the flush of embarrassment creeping up her neck. Helen knew that feeling intimately. 30 years ago, she'd been on a bus with her oldest son, David. He was about this baby's age, and he'd cried for 45 minutes straight. Every minute had felt like an hour. Every glance from other passengers had felt like a judgment on her entire existence as a mother. An elderly woman had finally moved to sit beside her. She hadn't said much, just hummed softly and told Helen, "This too shall pass, dear. You're doing just fine." Those words had meant everything. The plane began to taxi, and the baby's cries intensified. They rose above the engine noise, filling every corner of the cabin. Helen could see the man lean close to the woman, saying something she couldn't hear. The woman shook her head, tears visible on her cheeks now. Helen closed her book. She didn't overthink it. She simply unbuckled her seatbelt, stood, and made her way up the aisle. Her hand steadied against the seats as the plane moved beneath her feet. When she reached row 5, she paused. The young woman looked up, her face flushed and wet with tears. Up close, Helen could see she was beautiful, late 20s, maybe 30, but exhausted in a way that went deeper than one difficult flight. "Excuse me," Helen said gently, her voice soft enough not to startle, but clear enough to be heard over the crying. "I don't mean to intrude, but I raised 3 children of my own. Sometimes babies just need a different voice, a different pair of arms. Would you like me to try?" The woman's eyes widened. Relief and gratitude flooded her expression so quickly that Helen's heart squeezed. "Would you?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Please, I've tried everything. We've been traveling since early this morning, and I don't know what else to do." The man in the navy suit studied Helen for a long moment. His dark eyes were intelligent, assessing but also desperate. He had the look of someone accustomed to solving problems, frustrated by one he couldn't fix. "Her name is Emma," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of sleepless nights. "We would be very grateful for any help you can offer." Helen smiled warmly and gently reached toward the baby. The young woman lifted Emma with the careful reverence of someone handling something infinitely precious and impossibly fragile. As Helen took the baby into her arms, she felt the solid warmth of the small body, the trembling that came with each sob. "Hello, sweet Emma," Helen murmured, adjusting the baby against her shoulder in that practiced way mothers never quite forget. "What big feelings you're having today." Emma's cries continued, but Helen didn't rush. She began to sway, side to side, a gentle, ancient rhythm that every mother discovers independently and every baby recognizes instinctively. Back and forth, back and forth. Her body remembered this dance, even though her own children were grown now, living in different cities with families of their own. Then, softly, Helen began to sing. "Hush, little baby. Don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." The melody was old, passed down through generations. Her own mother had sung it. Her grandmother before that. Helen's voice was gentle, not performing for anyone, simply offering comfort in the only way she knew how. "And if that mockingbird won't sing, Mama's gonna buy you a diamond ring." Emma's cries began to change. The desperate wails softened to whimpers. Her breathing hitched and stuttered, little gasps between sobs. Helen continued singing, adding a subtle bounce to her swaying, the kind that mimics the rhythm of a mother's walk. Around them, the cabin grew quieter. People were listening now, but Helen barely noticed. She was focused entirely on the small, warm weight in her arms. On the way Emma's tiny hand reached up and grabbed a fistful of her cardigan. On the gradual relaxation of the baby's rigid little body, and if that diamond ring turns brass, Mama's gonna buy you a looking glass. Helen thought of her own daughter, Jessica, now 32 and 6 months pregnant with Helen's first grandchild. Soon, Helen would be singing these same lullabies to a new generation. The thought filled her chest with a bittersweet warmth, joy tinged with the passage of time, with the awareness that life moves in circles, always returning to these fundamental moments of care and connection. Emma's cries had stopped entirely now. Her blue eyes, impossibly large and round, stared up at Helen's face with that intense, focused attention that only babies possess, as if Helen were the most fascinating thing in the entire universe. "There we go," Helen whispered, still swaying. "Sometimes we just need someone to remind us that the world isn't so scary after all." She continued humming, letting the melody wind through the cabin like a soft breeze. Emma's eyes began to droop, fighting sleep even as her body surrendered to exhaustion. Her little rosebud mouth worked silently, and then finally her eyes closed. Helen kept swaying for another minute, making sure the baby was truly settled. Then she looked up and saw the young woman crying silently, tears streaming down her beautiful face. "Thank you," the woman mouthed, her hands pressed to her chest. "Thank you so much." Helen smiled and carefully, slowly transferred the sleeping baby back. "Keep swaying just like this," she demonstrated, showing the gentle side-to-side motion. "And if she starts to wake, hum something, anything. It's not about the song itself. It's about the rhythm, the comfort of hearing a voice that cares." The woman nodded, cradling Emma with renewed confidence. "You're a natural," Helen added softly. "Don't let moments like this make you doubt yourself. Being a parent or caring for a child is the hardest job in the world. And you're doing it beautifully." The man in the navy suit had stood up. He was tall, probably 6'1" or 6'2", with the kind of presence that commanded rooms. But right now his eyes were bright with emotion. "Please," he said, his voice rough, "let me upgrade your seat to first class, or business class at the very least. It's the least we can do to thank you." Helen shook her head gently. "That's very kind, but it's truly not necessary. I'm perfectly comfortable where I am. And honestly, seeing this little angel peaceful, that's more than enough thanks for me." "Then at least let me give you my card." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a sleek business card. "My name is Daniel Mitchell. If there's ever anything, and I mean anything at all, that I can do for you or your family, please don't hesitate to call." Helen accepted the card politely, glancing at it briefly. "Daniel Mitchell, Chief Executive Officer, Mitchell Technologies." The company name sounded vaguely familiar, something to do with medical devices or healthcare technology, perhaps. She'd read about them in the business section of the Tribune, but none of that mattered to Helen. Titles and positions had never impressed her much. "I'm Helen Porter," she said simply, tucking the card into her cardigan pocket. "And truly seeing Emma settled is all the thanks I need. There's no debt here, just one person helping another." But as Helen turned to return to her seat, the young woman reached out and caught her hand. Her grip was warm, urgent. "Wait," she said. "Please, I'm Sarah Mitchell, and I need you to know." Her voice cracked, and she took a shaky breath. "This is our first flight since we lost Daniel's wife, Emma's mother. It's been 6 months, and some days—" She couldn't finish. The words hit Helen like a physical blow.